They told you that by the time you turned 30, you'd have it all figured out. A stable job, a fulfilling relationship, a body you're proud of, a future mapped out in glowing detail. But now you're standing at the threshold of your 30s, and instead of certainty, you're met with silence. No one warned you about this silence. No one told you how strange it feels to be too old to be figuring things out, and yet too young to give up. No one prepared you for the quiet collapse of dreams you never realized you had. And so begins the phase that no one talks about. But I will. You look around and suddenly everyone seems to be ahead. Some are having children. Some are buying homes. Some are building companies. And you are just trying to feel okay when you wake up in the morning. You scroll through your feed and see wedding rings, passports, degrees, smiles, and your stomach tightens, not from envy, but from a strange feeling you can't name, like a clock ticking inside your chest, but no one else seems to hear it. You wonder, am I behind? Did I miss something? Why does everyone else look so certain, so together, so successful? No one talks about how lonely it feels. To reach the age when people stop asking you what you want to be when you grow up, because now, you're supposed to be it. The truth is, your 30s are a mirror. They reflect everything you've done and everything you haven't. They force you to look at the person you've become and ask, is this really me? Sometimes you don't like the answer. Sometimes you don't even recognize the person staring back at you. Not because you've failed, but because you've outgrown who you once thought you'd be. And that is terrifying. You begin to notice the cracks, the friendship that faded with no explanation, the job that became a cage, the ambition that once burned like fire, now flickers like a dying candle. People say you should be grateful, grateful to have a job, grateful to have a roof, grateful to be alive, and you are. But you're also quietly grieving, grieving the version of yourself you thought you'd be by now, grieving the years that passed while you were too busy surviving to truly live. Here's what no one tells you. Your 30s are not about having it all. They're about losing what was never yours to begin with. You lose the pressure to impress people who don't matter. You lose the belief that success has a deadline. You lose the fantasy that everyone else has it figured out. But in that loss, you gain something deeper. Clarity, stillness, self-respect. You begin to rebuild, not for validation, not for status, but for peace. So if you're still here, stay with me until the end of this reflection. Because everything you thought was falling apart might just be falling into place. This isn't the end of your story. It's just the part no one talks about. But we will. Together. You wake up one morning and realize that the urgency in your chest isn't ambition anymore. It's survival. You're no longer chasing dreams like you did at 22. Now, you're chasing space. Quiet. Stability, a breath that doesn't feel borrowed, and that's the thing no one says aloud. In your 30s, you're still dreaming, but the dreams look different. They're softer, quieter, private, not flashy enough for Instagram, but heavy enough to carry your soul. You stop wanting more, you start wanting better. Better mornings, better relationships, better conversations, fewer things, deeper meanings. The world doesn't reward that shift. Because it's not visible. No one claps for healing. No one celebrates when you learn how to set a boundary. No one throws a party because you said no for the first time in your life to something that always made you feel small. But that's the real growth. That's the kind of success no one measures. But it matters more than anything. You realize that burnout isn't just from work. It's from constantly pretending to be okay. It's from smiling when your heart is exhausted. It's from giving everything to people who never asked how you were doing. It's from trying to keep up with lives that were never yours to emulate. And so, little by little, you withdraw. You don't announce it. You don't post about it. You just disappear a little. Not because you're broken, but because you're finally ready to become whole. Your 30s demand silence. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you're finally choosing who is worthy of hearing your voice. You stop rushing into rooms where you're not respected. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing love that only comes when you earn it. And instead, you walk slowly. You breathe deeper. You build inward. People start to notice. Why are you so quiet? Why don't you hang out anymore? Are you okay? And the answer is yes. For the first time in years, you're not performing. You're not people-pleasing. You're not sacrificing your peace to feel needed. You're just being. And it feels unfamiliar. But it also feels right. Because no one talks about how your 30s are the age of return. Returning to your body. Returning to your voice. Returning to your intuition. Returning to the younger version of you. The one you abandoned to survive. And when you meet them again, you apologize. You tell them, I know I left you, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere again. That is healing. That is adulthood. That is peace. There's a strange kind of grief in your 30s. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet waves of mourning for the time you didn't know you were wasting. You begin to look back at people you gave too many chances, jobs you stayed in too long, parts of yourself you silenced just to keep the peace. But this grief isn't a punishment. It's a cleansing. It's the way your soul makes room for what's next. You forgive yourself not because you're done hurting, but because you finally understand that you were doing your best with what you knew. And that's enough. You no longer crave being understood by everyone. You no longer explain your silence. You no longer justify your peace, because you've tasted the noise and it nearly drowned you. Now you've learned the language of stillness, the kind that teaches you to stay calm in chaos, the kind that helps you recognize who deserves access to your inner world. You begin to say less, and you hear more. You stop reacting. You start observing. You learn that not every emotion needs a response. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every loss needs a replacement. There's a day, maybe not marked on a calendar, when you wake up and realize you're no longer trying to catch up. You're not in a race. You're not behind. You're just in your own timeline. And for the first time, that's enough. The world continues to spin with its metrics and milestones. But you've stepped off the treadmill. And in doing so, you've stepped into yourself. You start to appreciate the little things. A quiet morning with coffee. A walk without your phone. An honest conversation. A good night's sleep. A moment when your mind isn't racing. These aren't luxuries. They are victories. Because when you've been anxious for most of your life, calm is revolutionary. You also begin to lose people. Some slowly, some all at once. But not all loss is tragic. Some loss is sacred. Some people were chapters, not the whole book. And you were never meant to stay stuck in a chapter that no longer grows you. It hurts. Of course it does. But it also frees you. There's a strength that builds in the quiet. A fire that doesn't burn, but warms. You no longer chase loud success. You no longer crave external validation. You're building a life that doesn't need to be seen to be real. And that is the part no one tells you. You're not invisible. You're becoming solid, rooted, centered, like a tree that grows quietly, but deeply. There comes a time in your 30s when you stop asking for permission. Not out of defiance, but because you realize no one truly knows your path but you. You stop waiting for someone to validate your choices. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop softening your voice to make others feel more comfortable. And suddenly, you feel lighter. Not because life is easier, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of other people's expectations. You begin to notice how much of your past was lived on autopilot. Jobs you chose because they were safe. People you dated because they were available. Dreams you ignored because they felt too far away. Now, in your 30s, you want depth. You want meaning. You want to look at your life and feel something real. So you start over. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You declutter your space, your schedule, your soul. You realize you don't need more. You need less, but more of what matters. Some days, this feels empowering. Other days, it feels lonely. Because not everyone will come with you. Not everyone will understand your silence, your solitude, your refusal to settle. But growth has never been a group project. Sometimes becoming your best self means losing the version of you that everyone liked. And that's okay. Because you're not here to be liked. You're here to be true. You start to notice a strange peace creeping in. Not the kind that comes from a perfect life, but the kind that comes from no longer needing one. You sit in the quiet and realize you are no longer chasing the next thing. You're finally living in the now, even if it's messy, even if it's uncertain, even if it's quiet. And that's where the magic begins. You begin to trust yourself again. The voice inside you that once whispered, "Something's not right." You silenced it for years. But now you listen, and that voice becomes louder, stronger, wiser. It tells you when to rest, when to walk away, when to stay still, when to leap. You no longer look for signs outside of you. You are the sign. You are the signal. You are the compass. So if you've been feeling lost, let this be a reminder. You're not late. You're just in the part of the story no one talks about. The part where you stop performing and start becoming. The part where you stop chasing and start creating. The part where you stop surviving and start living. In silence. In strength. In truth. There's a beauty in choosing yourself. Not in a selfish way. Not in a loud, dramatic declaration. But in the quiet decision to stop abandoning who you are. You begin to honor your energy. You notice what drains you. You notice what nourishes you. And you begin to choose accordingly. No more proving, no more performing, no more pleasing just to be loved. Because now you understand something deeper. Love that must be earned is not love. Attention that fades when you stop entertaining is not connection. And peace that only exists when you're silent is not peace. It's suppression. You begin to replace urgency with presence. Not everything needs to be done today. Not every goal must be reached by 35. Not every silence must be filled with noise. You find joy in stillness, power in patience, and grace in going slow. And it terrifies people who are addicted to speed, to results, to attention, to loudness. But you're no longer available for their chaos. You've chosen your own rhythm, and it's quieter, but far more real. You realize healing doesn't mean you never hurt. It means you no longer run from the hurt. You let it teach you. You let it pass through. You let it shape you without defining you. There's a sacred strength in sitting with your sadness, without numbing it, without rushing through it, without pretending it isn't there, because that's where truth lives, in the raw, in the honest, in the quiet. You start to rebuild, not with grand gestures, but with small sacred habits, waking up early just to breathe, putting your phone down to listen to your thoughts, saying no to things that steal your peace, creating more than you consume, loving yourself in ways you used to demand from others. You're not just surviving anymore. You're sculpting a life, deliberate, intentional, rooted in meaning. People may not see the transformation, but you feel it, in your posture, in your words, in the way you stop apologizing for existing. You've reclaimed your space, your time, your identity. You no longer need to explain why you're quieter now, why you've let some people go, why you don't show up everywhere anymore. You've outgrown the noise. You've outgrown the hustle. You've outgrown the version of you that thought exhaustion was a badge of honor. So here you are, in your 30s, not lost, not broken, but becoming, more aware, more awake, more aligned. You've traded fast wins for deep roots. You've traded applause for peace. You've traded being seen for truly seeing yourself. And that's the part no one talks about. But it's the part that changes everything. You begin to unlearn everything they taught you. That productivity defines your worth. That busyness is a badge of honor. That sacrifice equals love. That silence means weakness. But your silence now is different. It's not a void, it's a boundary. It's not absence, it's presence, focused inward. You're no longer addicted to being needed. You no longer measure your value by how many people depend on you. You've stopped being everyone's emergency contact at the cost of being your own caretaker. Now, you choose peace over people-pleasing, solitude over performance, depth over distraction. Your life starts to feel smaller on the outside, but richer on the inside. Fewer social gatherings, fewer shallow friendships, fewer fake smiles, but more real conversations, more meaningful rituals, more moments that feel sacred instead of shared. You begin to curate your existence like a minimalist art piece, stripping away the excess until only the essential remains. And for the first time, you can breathe. You begin to value things differently. Time becomes sacred. Energy becomes currency. Attention becomes a gift. One you no longer give recklessly. You realize you've been spending your life as if you had endless credit. Now, you live like it's cash. Consciously, carefully, gratefully, not out of fear, but out of reverence, because now you know. The older you get, the more your soul demands quality over quantity. You start to look at your scars differently, not as signs of failure, but as proof that you've lived, that you've grown, that you've returned. Returned to yourself, returned to truth, returned to the parts of you that were never broken, only buried. You no longer chase healing like a finish line. You let it be a rhythm, a cycle, a quiet unfolding. And with each breath, you soften, you expand, you begin again. You realize that self-respect sometimes looks like walking away, not with bitterness, not with anger, just with certainty. Because not everything lost is a tragedy. Some losses are assignments, sent to redirect you back to your alignment. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because you understand yourself. You no longer fear being alone, because you've made peace with your own company. You no longer fear falling behind, because you've stopped running toward lives that aren't yours. So you wake up, not to conquer the world, not to impress the crowd, but to honor the life you've built in silence. You open your eyes and realize you are not late, you are not broken, you are not failing. You're just finally listening to your soul, to your breath, to your truth. And that is everything they forgot to teach you. There's a moment, subtle, soft, when you realize you're no longer waiting to be rescued. Not by love, not by success, not by some future version of yourself. You're not chasing anymore. You're receiving. You're no longer forcing doors open. You're sitting still long enough to see which ones open for you, effortlessly. And this shift, this quiet surrender, feels like freedom. You no longer beg life to get easier. You ask to become stronger, softer, wiser. You no longer pray for the storm to pass. You ask to find shelter within yourself. You no longer crave the noise of applause. You rest in the echo of your own truth. And in that stillness, you finally meet the person you've been searching for. You, not the version filtered for acceptance, not the mask you wore to survive, not the identity built on expectation, but the real you, the one who remained through it all, the one who stayed silent when the world was too loud, the one who kept showing up, even when no one was watching. That is who you are now. Not a title, not a status, but a presence, calm, rooted, aware. People might not understand the life you're building. That's okay. It wasn't meant for them. Your peace will confuse the anxious. Your boundaries will offend the entitled. Your solitude will look like sadness to the untrained eye. But you know the truth. You know that silence is not emptiness. It's a sacred space, a place where your soul can breathe again. So here's the truth I promise to share. The one no one talks about after 30. This isn't the end of your life. It's the beginning of your real one. Not the one built on scripts and checklists, but the one you create in quiet, honest alignment. You're not broken. You're blooming. In the dark, in the quiet, in your own divine timing. And while the world rushes by with noise and distraction, you are becoming. And tonight, as your head rests on the pillow and your thoughts begin to soften, let this be the final whisper. You are not late. You are just silent. And in that silence, you are powerful. Silent pivot for those becoming quietly.